Welcome to Rules of Villainy, where three new trading card game players quest and challenge their way to the competitive top tables and discuss their opinions on Disney's Lorcana. This is episode 13, the Villain's Lucky Number. This week, we're going to go over the news of Lorcana, discussing the current meta following the two DLCs in Las Vegas and Birmingham. We'll be joined by a top 16 qualifier for a breakdown of his experience in, as always, our Villain of the Week. I'm Villain Vince, joined by my two co-hosts, Villain Andy, and the mayor of Lorcana, Brad. How's it going tonight, gentlemen?
I'm not good, Vince. Not good.
Not good?
What's wrong, Brad?
We are a month away from Seattle, and I have no idea what I'm going to play. And I thought that I did going to League last night, and I got 0-3'd with my Blurple deck, and it did not feel good.
Did you not watch our episode where is Blurple the best deck?
We asked the question, but did we confirm it?
Brad answered it for us. If you are having trouble deciding which deck, join our Villain Support Center because I also am having trouble which deck to decide for Seattle. So we'll start a club.
Yeah. Well, it's honestly same, gentlemen, because tonight at League, playing Ruby Sapphire, which as I think we know is a pretty good deck. I went 3-0 against Jesus on it. We traded. He was playing Amethyst Steel. We traded decks, and he proceeded to beat me with my own deck, with the deck that he just said. So I actually went 4-0 tonight. And I think maybe that at a certain point, when do we just say it's pilot error and not?
What are you saying? 3-0 and 4-0. That sounds like you won.
No. Well, listen, I can't do math. Okay, it's late. All right, I'm just saying I lost every game I played tonight.
Yeah. Okay. Now I understand. Yeah, we definitely need to start a club. Bad and None is looking very favorable.
Yeah. So, well, let's get into. We've got a packed show, so let's get into Underworld news. Andy, you want to kick us off for some Shimmering Skies update?
Shimmering Skies Set Championships coming up. That's not this weekend. Next weekend, October 6th, we are going to be live streaming the Shimmering Skies Set Championships at Grape's Games. You've seen us there before. Actually, you haven't. This is a new venue. But come on down. Yeah, there we go. Brad has got the Grape's Games sticker on his deck box. So, yeah, October 6th. Still don't have a time nailed down. Brad, when is it? Did you tell us when it started? 1 o'clock?
Yeah, I think it's at 1 o'clock. Yeah.
Okay, so it should be sometime around 1 o'clock Central Time. We'll post more on that. Be sure to like, subscribe, and ring the bell to be notified when we go live.
Yeah, and we'll try to make sure that when you actually do click that bell notification, the link you go to is the video that plays.
We like making it difficult for our viewers. Only the true viewers who get through the puzzle can make it. We'll fix it.
But yeah, we're excited to be doing it. So Annie and I will be both the casters for that event. I think him and I are both pretty pumped and excited. And hopefully it won't be the only one that we're doing for the Shimmering Skies Set Championship. But I'm definitely excited about that coming up. And speaking of championships, there was the Disney Lorcana Challenges this weekend. One in Las Vegas and one in Birmingham. The first time we've had two since the first in Atlanta and Lille. And in DLC Birmingham, which because of time zone happened a little bit earlier, we had the winner was Federico Marinelli. Probably mispronounced that. But was with the Ruby Sapphire, and the runner-up Jonathan Patini with the Amethyst Emerald. And then at the DLC Vegas, we had the winner, Zan Syed, as I think most of you probably know who are listening to this, know who that is. One came in first. He's been in a lot of these set championships in the top 64, even top like 60, top 8, top 4.
Atlanta was top 4, I think.
Yeah. So, but won the event for the first time with an Emerald Steel deck, and it was actually a mirror match with Chris Lewis, who is also playing Emerald Steel. So congratulations to all 4 of those individuals to make it to the top table at both of those events. And also really great congratulations to both Federico and Zan for being our champions this weekend.
Zan
were
is
both
such a good player.
Yeah, and they were both incredible games to watch. The finals match. I haven't finished the second match of Zan's game, but
Spoiler alert, he wins.
yeah, thank you. But that first game I watched, the way that he manipulated the bag and all the triggers that he needed to be successful with it. I mean, it was a crazy back and forth with the draws and the discards and the bounces that just incredible feat to watch. And then the Ruby Sapphire over there in Birmingham, I watched that final game too, and he was just complete control. It was great.
Master.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit more about the meta here, but first we are going to kick it over to you, Mr. Mayor, with Constituents Corner, because we actually have some questions from our longtime listeners.
Yes, we do. From Jimmy Moore here. He is very much, and he announces it. Longtime listener, first time caller. He says, "Does this set championship season look like another round of quote play whatever you're most comfortable with? There is no tier 0 deck above the rest. Why or why not? If yes, is that a good thing or a sign of a healthy meta or a bad thing?" I'm sorry I didn't read that very well, but
Andy, I think we need to get the mayor some better glasses. He's always challenging with.
Yeah, I didn't read that. I didn't read that very well.
It's all good.
It was a teleprompter error. It was a teleprompter error.
Yes.
We'll just read whatever's on the prompter, and one of us fat fingered it. That's on us.
Except for it's a screenshot of the actual question.
Well, to answer the question,
I was going to hand it over to Vince because
go ahead then, Vince.
Yeah. Let's put you on the spot.
Yeah, no, because I'm getting trouble. I will say this always. I think it depends, right? There's a range of players that you are. If you're if this is kind of your first competitive events or you've really only done set championships, I would still say play what you're most comfortable with. I think that's the rule that I would say. If you are a much more experienced TCG player, you have I think a lot more flexibility because you can think about the game in a different way that you may not have when you don't have that much experience. I put myself in that category, is to play what you're most comfortable with. And I haven't been taking my own advice right now because obviously what I'm most comfortable with is Ruby Amethyst, but I'm trying to get better and play a different deck. As far as whether or not, though, I think, is there a tier, 0 deck? Is there I think, Andy will probably say this, is I do feel like we're in a, what would be considered more of like a rock, paper, scissors meta here, which is that there are decks that, are good, but they have weaknesses to primarily one other deck. And you have to think about the meta shift you go into. So I would expect, much like we saw in the DLCs here this past weekend, the decks that we're probably going to see at your set championships are going to be the Ruby Amethyst, are going to probably be Emerald Steel. We'll probably see that tick up a little bit. We'll probably see, Emerald Amethyst. I question, based on kind of the results and its performance, whether or not Amber Steel will see much performance. But I will also say, you're going to see a lot of other decks out there like hyper aggro, that are going to be more common, I think, in your set championships than they necessarily were at the DLC. But Andy, what do you think?
Yeah, I tend to agree. There's definitely no tier 0 deck. I tend to think of it like you're picking your race car in Mario Kart or whatever it might be. Some of them have better stats in different places than others. If you aren't incredibly comfortable with the deck, I would definitely recommend looking at one of the top 3 decks. Like you said, Ruby, Amethyst, Steel Song, or Red Blue. Although, like Ben said, Steel Song might get edged out by Emerald Steel. Don't know. One thing I do think I will say is I think this is healthy for the meta. I really like the idea that something like Emerald Steel or Emerald Amethyst or even Amber Emerald. I love that we had such a diverse listing of ink colors in these large events, it really proves that you can play almost any deck, not Blurple Brad, but almost any deck that you want to and still see success with it. I think the real key is to just make sure you're practicing. Make sure you have your matchups, you focus on them, and get in those reps so that you can feel comfortable with whatever deck you decide you want to play.
I agree. Yeah, it's very healthy. I do like my Blurple. I have to comment on that first. I'm sorry, but I think it's healthy to see all the colors and to get those repetitions in, to know what to expect when you're up against those other colors. Yeah, you threw me off with the Blurple comment. That's all I'm focusing on right now. But we're in a place. That's what I wanted to touch on. We're in a place now with the new set championships where the last one, like, we all knew we were going to run into Bucky, right? And that's where it was the unhealthiest, where like everybody was going to play Bucky, everybody teched against Bucky, and so I felt compelled to play against Bucky. Not necessarily what I wanted to play. I do like Blue Steel, but I'm like, everybody's going to be playing Bucky, so I have to play this. But I think it's as Andy was touching on, it's a good place where you can play any combination and get the right matchups and be successful. Right now, it is what it feels like. So I'm happy and excited to see what the set championships bring.
Yeah. And with the top 8, with the prizing being expanded to top 8, I think it's even more of a reason you can bring pretty much any deck that you want. There is, the set championships are admittedly smaller events, but there is this idea of, at an event, a deck that does good against the field in like a Swiss rounds is not always the same as the deck that does really good in the top cut, because you're going to be playing against the best players, the best decks, the most refined lists. You know, if the tournament did its thing, that's how it shakes out. And so, you know, you don't have to worry about the fact that you get to that top cut and then you lose to, you know, that one deck that is slightly better than yours. You get the opportunity to play what you want and still have a chance at some good prizing. So I'm excited for that.
Yeah. Well, what's our next question?
Next question is from John. He asked, here's a question. Given the results of the last 2 DLCs, do you think Emerald Steel is the strongest deck right now? Why or why not? We'll start with Andy this time. Okay.
Next question.
Vince.
It's so funny because that's literally the same thing I was going to say. Like
all right, that wraps up Constituent Corner. All right. Thanks for the question, John.
No. It's my answer.
You answered half the question. Why not?
Oh.
It's because it's got Emerald in it.
Because it's got Emerald in it. Yeah, exactly. Like, that's
3 of the 4 decks in these 2 final fours were Emerald.
Here's I'm going to give you my reasoning. Okay, John? Great. Listen. All right. S tier ink color is Amethyst. A is Sapphire Ruby. And then B, well, maybe Steel in there too. B is Amber. F tier is Emerald. Okay. Like, it's just not even on the list. Like, you might as well just take your Emerald cards and, you know, throw them in the fireplace.
This sounds incredibly biased and subjective.
It does feel like Emerald has like bad versions of other cards, right? Like, I love Bonsai. That's such a good 2-drop, but like, isn't Smee better? Like, just always better? And so it's like, well, you got the reject Smee, and then you're like, oh, well, we've got, you know, some removal, yeah, but it's got to be damaged first. So you get the reject Steel removal or the red removal or whatever. So it's
listen, the Emerald hate is real on this.
Why is Smee objectively better?
Yeah,
it's inkable.
Okay, I didn't think about the inkable part, but I was thinking about the continuous damage. Like, it
has an additional willpower as well. Granted, if you quest with Smee, it now is a 3/2 on your opponent's turn. So like there is that, you know, side of it, but
you got me with the inkable. I didn't think that far.
I think Smee is just better, but I mean, it's a different ink color too, right? That's the other thing, that when you compare 2 cards that are from 2 different ink colors, you really have to. Some cards become better because they have other ink colors that they pair well with, or they have other cards that help them make them a lot better, right?
Yeah.
Popsicle, for example, Cogsworth for Smee and stuff make it incredibly better. Captain Hook, Piglet, all these other cards that people are pairing with it that are also good cards.
You know, the worst part about me though, saying all this stuff about Emerald is like one day I'm gonna run an Emerald deck and I'm gonna get nothing but crap from folks.
Oh,
for like,
for
why
sure.
did you do this? No, so I am, in jest kidding about the my Emerald. It's not my favorite ink color. But why do I not think that this is the strongest deck to play? Is because one is that when we talked about this a little bit last week, what decks did we expect to go into the meta? And basically what we saw there with the top three, Ruby Sapphire, Amber Steel, and Ruby Amethyst being the top three, those are the decks that folks were thinking about how to adapt to. And now that we've seen these other decks get into the meta, people are going to think about the meta differently and tech differently to them. And Emerald Steel, there's some cool things that are being done with those. There's cool things that I think that Emerald Amethyst in particular, I actually think Emerald, if I were to play Emerald, I would play Emerald Amethyst over Emerald Steel. I think I like that deck and its mechanics of being able to bounce things. I also agree with Andy a lot that Amethyst is just one of the strongest ink colors. It is the most reliable kind of card draw, which we talked a little bit about previously in one of our villain of the week with Rabbit.
Best card in the
game. Well, we know what your favorite card is. So I don't think Emerald Steel is by any means the best deck in the game. I think it had a really great showing, and it's also really important to understand it had a really awesome pilot.
Yeah.
At the DLC. Like, it's hard to underestimate somebody like Zian Syed who just thinks about the game in a much, much different way, thinks about the triggers in ways that are advantageous to him to play, versus I think, an average Emerald Steel player probably doesn't have that.
Yeah.
No, not to discredit the other Emerald Steel players that also made top cut. I mean, we did see an Emerald Steel mirror match in the final.
Oh, absolutely.
So
I
other
put
guy,
I put them both in that.
He's not Zan, but he is also in the top two, right?
No. I think both Chris and Zan, both great players, both clearly understanding the advantages of using those decks, and anybody who makes the top 64 with those, for sure, I agree with you on those. And I was using Zan. Zan was really just a placeholder.
And also, it's just fascinating to watch both of those play too. The back and forth. I'm a broken record here, but I implore everybody to go watch the finals of the Las Vegas DLC and see these Emerald Steel decks just trade over and over again. The advantage of the game. It was fascinating.
Quality mid-range gameplay.
Yeah. So maybe contentious opinion here. So since we didn't answer the question we did answer this question on saying that we don't think Emerald Steel is the best deck in the game. What do you think the best deck in the game is?
I will say I think Emerald Steel clearly was the best deck to bring to Vegas. I just think, like you said, now that we see the metagame, it isn't the best deck, right? If everyone is playing Steel Song, and surprisingly Red Blue is not a great matchup for Green Steel, but they still took that chance and they did really well. I still think Ruby Amethyst is probably the best deck in the game. Got a lot more testing to do, but I can tell you for sure it's not Blurple.
This whole episode is just going to be a rag on Blurple. Okay.
No, I really do wish Ruby Amethyst was the best deck in the game, but I do think it is Sapphire Ruby, which is why it's one of the decks that I'm trying to get good at playing.
I think card wise, I think card value wise,
playing it too.
Like on paper and stuff, card value wise, like nothing beats Red Blue. It just has such high value cards, and it's a really great deck. I think my personal problem with it is the fact that I think Ravensburger is leaning Lorcana towards aggression and being the aggressor in the game, and having agency and control of the game, not like a
Mhm.
control deck necessarily, but being able to be the one driving the deck and forcing the answers out of your opponent, I think has a good bit of value. But we'll have to see.
Yeah,
I think
my
any of them
problem
are good
is
enough option.
my problem is I'm not good at it. That's my problem.
Be good.
It just takes reps. That's what we always say. You know, you take you play all these reps and you learn from playing it. Even if you don't like see yourself playing it in the future, you know, like you're going to be playing against people who are playing it. So now you can see those lines yourself and how, you know, you can put yourself in their shoes when you're up against it and what your deck at the time can do to try to mitigate, you know, what it's going to do to you.
Well, thanks, John and Jimmy, for your questions. If you have any questions for the villains, please send us your questions by commenting on this video or tagging us on Twitter at Rules of Villainy. Up next, we now have Justin Ward, a qualifier at DLC Vegas, here joining us on the pod. How you doing tonight, Justin?
I'm doing good, Vince. How are you?
Good. Thanks for joining us. Congratulations on the Continentals qualification. So you made top 16 at DLC Vegas running Ruby Sapphire. That's right.
Yes, that's correct.
Great. So tell us a little bit about your experience with TCGs and how did you get into Lorcana?
So my experience with TCGs goes pretty much back to probably whenever Pokemon initially came out. But of course I was like, you know, a little kid then, didn't really know how to play the Pokemon TCG. Eventually I moved on to Yu-Gi-Oh! When that came out around like 2002. But I didn't start playing competitive TCGs until 2007 with Yu-Gi-Oh! So I've been playing TCGs competitively for the past 17 years, almost 18 years now. Yeah. So there's a lot of knowledge up in this noggin.
Yeah, no kidding. So how did you get into Lorcana?
So I got into Lorcana initially. I saw like the teasers for it on Twitter or now X. Like what was it, 2-3 years ago now or something. But I was like, okay, that's gonna be cool. Maybe you know, it'll be a good game. And then whenever it came out last year, I was just completely done with playing Yu-Gi-Oh! So I decided to play Lorcana and sold all my Yu-Gi-Oh! Stuff and just fully invested in first chapter. So I got a lot of product and got all the stuff for first chapter, and I had just been playing ever since.
Yeah, that's awesome. It was hard days getting product in the early days of Lorcana. So you're the first person from the St. Louis community to qualify for Continentals in Disneyland. So we can actually officially say you're going to Disneyland here.
Yeah, the funny thing is with you saying that, they actually made us take a picture saying that in the day 2 room, which was pretty funny. They wanted everyone to like throw their hands up and everything, and I was like, okay, I'll do it. Jazz hands.
Yeah.
That's so awesome.
The
So how
Super
does it feel to qualify?
It feels really good, honestly. I mean, like whenever Lorcana first came out, there really wasn't much of a competitive scene, but I really liked the game, so I kept playing it. And then whenever they announced competitive play, I was like, okay, I want to get to Continentals and Worlds. So that has been a huge goal of mine. So it feels very awesome to achieve that, especially after the shortcoming I had in Chicago.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you ever been to Disneyland before?
I have not, no. I've actually never stepped foot in California. Vegas is the farthest west I've actually gone.
That's awesome. So you got any special plans for Disneyland aside from playing in the Continentals?
Well, fun fact, the weekend of Continentals, my birthday is on the 13th, so it's kind of like a little birthday trip for me, birthday event. So I was thinking of heading up there on like Wednesday, explore LA and Anaheim for a couple days before I have to settle in the playing card games all weekend.
Yeah, the food there is
awesome.
Great. In
Is
LA.
it?
Yeah, I hear the food is amazing out there. You can get anything you want.
I actually really want to go visit like the 100 Thieves and Face Clan compound out there.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
If you have the time, spending the time out there, one of the my favorite things I've ever done on the West Coast was we started in San Diego when we worked our way up the coast. instead of taking the major highway to go up to San Francisco and all that stuff, where the Walt Disney Museum is at, which is really cool to check out if you get the chance. But we rented a sports car and we just drove up the coast around, seeing all the sights and all the vista points and everything.
Oh, really?
Beautiful drive. It was an all day drive, but something that I would do again in a heartbeat if you have the time to do it. It's truly incredible.
Yeah, I mean, I'll have to see if I have the time, because like it'd be pretty cool to like travel down to San Diego, because I heard that the weather down there is actually pretty
Beautiful.
much peak, like perfect weather. So, but no, I mean, I'm excited to go to California. It'll be definitely a fun time. I already tried looking at how much it'll be to stay on the resort. I don't think my wallet will be really happy with it. So hopefully there are some like good participation prizes or something to help recuperate some of that. But it'll still be a fun time.
For sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, so before we get into digging into your Vegas experience, you kind of alluded to talking about Chicago. This isn't your, Las Vegas wasn't your first Disney Lorcana challenge, nor was it your first day 2. So can you talk a little bit about, your experience at Chicago, and you also went to the Fort Worth?
Yes. So the only challenges I've been to have been Chicago and Dallas Fort Worth. In Chicago, I got top 32, losing to Brian Cortade, which kind of sucks, since I was one step away from achieving that continentals invite. But he ended up winning the event, so it was like, I guess I lost to the winner, so it can't be that bad. But not only did I lose out on the invite at that point, there was one pass down invite in Top Cut, and because both Zach and I had lost, or Zach Bivens and I had lost in Top Cut, since he was ranked, I believe, first or something, I want to say, and I was in 8th after Swiss. He technically finished in 17th while I finished in 18th, so I also missed the pass down invite by one spot there.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So it was like, oh, here's a dagger here, and then here's the killer to the heart. So yeah. So but it feels good to get the invite in Vegas. As far as my experience in Dallas, was in kind of like a weird headspace regarding the format for Dallas. Obviously green steel was miserable to play against quite a bit. Miserable to play against, miserable to play, which is why I never really picked up the deck. I really enjoyed red blue, but then people were coping really hard, being like, oh, well, you can play ruby amethyst into green steel and be completely fine. And I was like, you can't really do that. And then so because people were doing that, it made playing red blue into ruby amethyst just not good, because the Flynn Sisu Castle line was just very hard to deal with. So you had to get lucky that they would miss it. And then but as far as my experience in Dallas, my first round opponent was actually supposed to be Thea Beastie, but she didn't show up, I assume because of the flight delays and everything. And then after that, it was just like Q into blue steel, Q into blue steel, Q into blue steel, and it was just 1-1s the entire way, just dime wars. So it was a very skillful and very frustrating day.
Yeah.
That's why. What did you end up playing in Dallas?
I ended up playing red blue with Pegasus in the main to help address the Flynns as well as Diablos. And then even though I didn't do great in day 1, I played in the constructed competitive side event, the 8-round challenge that they first introduced there. I started that one 004, and I was like, okay, this is like a weekend where just nothing's going my way. But then I ended up winning 4 straight and then finished 17th for 75 tickets. So
nice.
So that was pretty nice. I just ran back the same 60 that I had the day before. So
nice.
Got myself the Cindy mat and a Cindy promo with the other tickets that I had from the weekend.
Beautiful.
That's awesome.
I'm really glad they added those events.
Yeah, it's fun.
Such a great mat too, the Cindy mat.
Oh yeah. I've actually been
both.
Yeah, now I have both. I've actually been considering getting both of them framed with the card inside of it and just hanging them up on my wall. So
look amazing.
Yeah. So
they look great. They feel like they'd be rough to play with, I feel like the cards would get stuck on the foiling and you kind of ruin them. So that I feel like hanging up.
Yeah,
Great idea.
I haven't played on them. However, I have the Cindy and like one of those matte top loader, or not the Cindy, the Rapunzel and the like the matte top loader. Got it from the PPG booth for like $8. And then when I brought it to Collector last night, Elizabeth, I let Elizabeth play on it, and then she was worried about it at first, but then I was like, well, there's that top loader thing on it, so it'll be fine. And she's like, oh, okay. So
yep, she was one of my 3 losses last night. I got to look at that beautiful mat the whole time, though.
You were probably like, wow, I can't stop looking at that beauty.
So how did you prepare for Vegas? When you were doing Ruby Sapphire, what was the ultimate decision on picking that deck, and how'd you prepare?
So I was committed to Ruby Sapphire from the moment that Shimmering Skies had released. Looking at the entire card pool, it looked like Ruby Sapphire had improved the most out of every ink combination. They got Hideaway Cusco to help not only in the mirror matches by tucking away dimes that are left exposed on the board, but as well as clearing locations, which is actually like really important against Ruby Amethyst. So, and then not only that, but they got Tipo, and I think that card is just completely put Blue Red on another level. Yeah, so it just gives you 4 inkable 1-jumps, and a lot of people at the start, whenever it was revealed, said that like Tipo wasn't the greatest because it got rid of a card from your hand and then left a 1/2 body on board. And sure, that's true, but you're trying to look for consistent ways to ramp on turn 2 because you just want to skip turn 3 and play like Hiram or Tala to start getting the engines in your deck going. So I was just like, yeah, this card's great. And then Visions, I was like, this card's great too. This card just looks at the top 5 cards in my deck and just adds whatever is needed at the time if it's revealed among them. So it's very similar to a card called Impulse from Magic the Gathering, or a card called Pot of Prosperity from Yu-Gi-Oh, which that card is at 1 in Yu-Gi-Oh because of how good it is. So yeah, I was pretty set on it. The early aggro meta was kind of frustrating. I was coping pretty hard on doing like a ramp into the 4-drop Mulan with Rush from Rise of the Floodborn.
I remember that.
On turn 3, and then you shift in the big Mulan on turn 4, and then you just wipe their whole board and reset the game from there. That line was also played pretty well into Steel Song. But my list evolved throughout the last few weeks. I was doing a lot of theorying with my friend Dewey, who's from Chicago, who also made top 32 in Chicago as well as top 32 in Dallas. So him and I were refining a list, and I settled on a solid. I do want to say 60, but it was a 61 card deck. I just like there were so yeah, I know, shocker. But
which one was the worst card in your deck then?
Oh, none of them.
The 61st one was.
But whenever you look down onto it, yes, you can make an argument for the math, but it's not too much of a difference. The Lorcana mulligan system or altar system is very forgiving and very broken. They just take the Hearthstone mulligan and they're like, what if we do it with 7 cards? And you're just like, okay. I mean, it was a very consistent deck. I'm pretty sure I filtered through my entire deck every game or close to every game. So it was very nice. Visions was like the best card all weekend.
Yeah, I'm glad you touched on Visions. We have a question further down, Andy. Do you want to touch on that? Because we've been kind of skeptical on that card on this podcast, at least.
We definitely owe an apology to the card Visions of the Future. I personally, when I tried it, one of the biggest problems I had was flipping over more than one good card that I needed at a time. So if I needed more than one answer essentially to what was going on the board, they had a wide board and they just played a castle or something like that. I would end up getting both of my answers and then have to bottom one of them, or 4 cards essentially. And I was skeptical about how good it was losing potentially 4 good cards in exchange for 1 good card. But obviously the card is performed, and a lot of the commentators and stuff really love the card. You clearly really love the card.
Yeah.
What is it about it, I guess? Why?
So, if I break your heart by saying this, I'm sorry, but I think Visions is probably the best card in Ruby Sapphire right now. Just for the fact of the consistency it provides. Not only is it a turn 2 play to dig for a fishbone if you need that, it can also dig for answers like Brawl if you're on the draw against a Diablo. Also, I guess it's like only downside is that it's an action, which means that it gets hit by Pete. But in the later games, whenever you're sitting there with 10, 12, maybe more, sometimes more ink, you're able to dig for a Tamatoa and then play it on the same turn if you already don't have it. Also, my philosophy with that card is it's very similar to the Schrodinger's cat dilemma. It's like you have a cat in a box. It's both alive and dead. So like you have the top 5 cards of your deck. They're both good. They're all good and bad. So it's like, oh well, even if I ship good cards to the bottom, since I'm drawing through so many cards and filtering through so many cards in my deck, then I'm eventually going to get back to them. Which actually is what happened in my top 64 match. I ended up playing 4 visions in that game, and then the moment that I drew a Hiram when I had something like 20 cards left in deck, I was like, okay, now I know that there's a Maleficent, and a Medusa right beneath this Hiram that I had shipped back earlier. So it allowed me to also alter my game plan with that as well. But Visions is just a huge consistency booster. It also turns into any card. Sure, it can bottom like an answer that you want, but sometimes you're just digging for one specific answer, and being able to have a consistent way to get that is just an instant 4 of, in my opinion.
That makes sense. So I guess it's similar to like the one jump, where a lot of people would say, "Oh, well, one jump wasn't good because you might put your best card in your inkwell without looking at it." But really,
like
it's equally any card. So just do it and move
so
on.
like that one jump scenario, it's like you weren't guaranteed to see that card anyway. So even if it was on the top, it doesn't matter. As long as you're advancing your game plan, that's all you cared about.
And you just have to hope that you've put yourself in a situation where you don't need 2, 3, 4, 5 answers when you play the visions, and you're only hopefully looking for one answer, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you're in a position where you need like 3 different answers, then it doesn't matter if you send one to the bottom, because most of the time you probably weren't going to be able to dig for both unless you just went cast Hiram and draw both that you need. So
that's a good explanation. I like that.
So just kind of following up on that, you talk about filtering through your deck. So are you, it seemed like when we're watching the folks on stream, there wasn't a lot of thought into how to order those cards at the bottom of the deck. Are you putting any thought into how you order those cards that you send back at the bottom of your deck?
I watched someone shuffle them once. I watched someone guy shuffle them and throw them on the bottom.
Yeah, I don't know why people do that. I do put thought into it. There's a lot of times where, obviously, if I reveal one jump off the visions and a like Maui, those will be the bottom 2 cards in the 4 stack. But then there's sometimes where you have multiple items in a Tamatoa, and then you're just like, okay, well, I need to order these in a certain way to get the most maximum value out of it. So, for instance, there were times where I put Tamatoa on top with a popsicle, then a fishbone beneath it, so you could chain into them. Then that way you're able to make your Tamatoa an actual threat the moment it comes down. But then there's also times where you're like, I revealed dragons and Medusa. Dragons should go on top, Medusa should go on bottom, just because dragons answer everything. Medusa answers a lot of things, but not everything. You can also order in a certain way where you get that Medusa first if you want, just for like ink purposes of being able to cast multiple spells in a turn. But yeah, I generally actually take time in thinking of what to put to the bottom. I even do that with Ariel and other cards as well.
And you were saying earlier, you at least try to consciously make an effort to remember which cards you put back in which order and stuff like that? Like you said, you got to that Hiram and you're like, oh, now I know that I'm on these next couple cards because I remember what order I put them back in with my vision.
Yeah, so I pay attention to a lot of details, especially with my deck. Whenever I'm using cards like Tala Visions, to put stuff to the bottom. That way I know it's like when I'm trying to dig for a specific answer, I'm like, okay, I know that like I shuffled a Be Prepared, or not shuffled, but sent a Be Prepared to the bottom of my deck early in the game. So it's not going to be within the top X cards of my deck. So being cognizant of that, I also remember a lot of relevant cards that get inked by my opponent as well. I know it's a thing that's difficult for some people, but it really isn't for me. But it's probably just because of my experience playing card games. So
yeah, definitely. It definitely a hard skill to do, but if you can, I can just imagine, you filtered through 20 cards in your deck plus the Grammatalas and all this. There's a point where essentially you can have memorized the order of your deck now, right? You now know the next 15 cards in your deck are in this exact order, and that can become very, very advantageous. I can see that.
Yeah, so like with playing those 4 visions in that top 64 match, I knew that the bottom, 16 cards? I mean, obviously I knew the top 4, but I also knew what was beneath everything else. So like I knew that I'd shipped back to a couple Tamatoas, 1 dime, I think, and a few other things I can't remember right now. But I pretty much knew what order they were in, at least until the 7th card for sure. But like whenever you get down to that point, where you're going through those cards you had already filtered away, you're just drawing answers every turn, which is what ended up happening in that matchup. So it was pretty nice.
Yeah, that's super impressive. Another thing that I found very impressive is you went into round 9 in Swiss, needing that 2-0 to advance, right? And then sitting across from you is the winner of DLC Dallas. How did you deal with that kind of pressure, and what was that matchup like?
I looked on Melee whenever pairings went up, and I saw that I was matched against Ed, and his username is just Ed, so it was pretty not hard to forget. And I was like, oh, okay. If I remember, on Friday he was playing Green Steel, so in the Friday challenge side event. So I was like, okay, maybe he's still on Green Steel. So I feel very confident into the Green Steel matchup. Even last format, I felt pretty confident into it. Realistically, the only time that Green Steel should beat Ruby Sapphire is whenever they just nut draw you. So like going Diablo and turn 1 Diablo, shift Diablo next turn into like an Ursula or another relevant 2-drop into like singing a Sudden Chill, or like even following that up with a Prince John, and you're just like, oh, okay, this is like the Bucky Diablo opening all over again, but just a turn slower. But no, so I felt pretty confident. I mean, I played Sisu, 8 mana Sisu, wiped 5 characters off his board, and like just that card puts in so much work, especially with ice blocks. I was uncertain if he had Hidden Cove in his deck. I can't remember if he did or not. I know he posted his deck list on Twitter, I think, but I don't remember off the top of my head. I know that Zan did play Hidden Cove, but
so yeah, 1 or 2 of, right?
Yeah, and then also like I consciously made the decision to not play Sisu Daring Visitor over the weekend, the unequal 3-drop Sisu, just because that card, and outside of Ruby Sapphire into the entire meta, it was just very underwhelming because you needed multiple ice blocks in order to remove actual threats, and it wasn't a consistent answer to Diablo on the draw because you needed to have the ice block with it. And then not only if you did have that, but if they're playing Cove, then it means that Sisu can't even remove it. So I just elected to play 4 Brawl, and then the Brawls also comboed well with the ice block in the Emerald Amethyst matchup, because you can ice block Brawl a Bonsai, but you can't ice block Brawl or ice block Sisu a Bonsai. So
Yeah,
fair.
green purple was something I had on my radar with my deck building, which is why I made a couple odd decisions like the one Ruby Chromacon and the all 4 brawls.
Yeah, I think you pretty much answered one of the other questions here about like some of the decisions to include some of those cards. I think that's a great point there. There was one card I saw on your list that I did want to ask you about. I'm sure you probably already know what it is,
Yeah.
but how well did the King Candy do for you? And
So
what was the reason behind that?
So I wanted something for the mirror match that was what you would consider lore pressure, as well as another card that filtered through the deck. You could either do that with Gaston, Intellectual Powerhouse, or King Candy. I elected to go with Candy just because of the 5 ink cost. I valued being able to play that out on when I was on 5 ink a lot more than having the extra strength and willpower and extra lore that Gaston provided. King Candy also allows you to keep both the cards off the top of your deck instead of just one. And then you just get rid of the worst card in your hand. So there were a lot of times where I'd play that and then get rid of an uninkable that I didn't need at the time. Or like if I didn't need Be Prepared, I could ship it to the bottom. But the card was very good every time I played it. In my top 64 matchup, it helped me dig 2 cards deeper to get closer to the Be Prepared off the top of my deck, which ended up turning the game in my favor for game 3. And then after that, it was just answer after answer after answer. It was a very solid card, and even if in the mirror matches, if they answer it with like a Medusa or like Ice Block Brawl it still replaced itself. So any card that replaces itself in the mirror is a good card, because it's always a resource game, at least until the Tamatoa dimes come down. So when I'm playing the mirror match, there's cards that I consider pretty much pseudo uninkables. Like for instance, in any Amethyst based deck, you would almost consider like Goat, Fox, pseudo uninkables. Like you don't want to ink them unless you absolutely have to. In the mirror match, Maleficent Monstrous Dragon was one of those cards. So generally, I would ship it away during the mulligan phase, and then Maui is just like strictly ink most of the time in Ruby Sapphire. So anytime I drew that, it was just like, there you go, my Enchanted Maui into the inkwell for you.
So actually, the 4 that you had in your deck.
Yeah, I mean, my whole deck is max rarity except for like the D23 promo dragons. So
and the King Candy, right?
Yeah, I didn't have an enchanted. I actually tried buying an enchanted King Candy, but all the vendors had it marked for like $70+ when it was like $52 on TCG Player, and I was like, I'm not going to do that.
No, I don't
Are you
blame
gonna
you.
keep playing King Candy?
Maybe.
I got one. I'll trade you.
Nice. I actually
wish I'd known. I would have
let
let you borrow it for Vegas or something.
Oh, it's all fine. It was actually a last minute decision. It was literally something I put in my deck at like 11 p.m., 12 a.m., something like that.
A lot of people tell you not to tinker the night before.
I always tinker the night before. Even in Yu-Gi-Oh, I've made like complete decisions to just change decks at like 1, 2 a.m. in the morning, and then I go on to win the regional or whatever tournament the next day. So it's like very common for me.
I tinkered my deck at TCS last night and went 0-3. So
some people are born tinkerers.
Hey, Brad, I have a word of advice for you.
Don't run Blurple.
Get good.
Yeah. Oh no, I get that all the time. It's all good. So you're hinting at probably still running Red Blue. Are you going to Seattle? Was that the deck maybe you're considering, or are you waiting to see if the meta shifts a little bit and do more tinkering?
So Seattle I will be at Seattle. I already booked my flight and everything. Did that the moment I got back from Vegas. As far as playing what I'm playing there, it'll most likely be Ruby Sapphire. But with my invite, I may just decide to play something else. But the chance of getting that golden Mickey is also like very alluring. So especially since I was one win away from actually getting one myself.
We were all rooting for you, man.
Yeah,
It would certainly make the affordability of going to Continental a lot easier.
yeah, for sure. Listen, in game one, I was on the draw in the mirror match, which already kind of sucks, but you can play out of it. My starting 7 was a brick, and my mulligan was a brick with no turn 2 ramp, and he went item, Tipo, Hiram, and I was like, all right, this game's over. So I was already mentally checked out of that game after turn 3. The second game was serviceable, but then I just ran out of gas, and it was just whatever. Fun story, when I pulled out my deck box and took out my dice tray, all the dice went everywhere. So I was like, all right, this is bad omen. I guess it's the end of the day for me. And then it just ended up happening. So
yeah. So you talk a little bit about being like a deck tinkerer here.
Yeah.
So question that we have is, a Ruby Sapphire, I think, is like fairly a difficult deck to pilot, difficult deck to construct. So talk us through a little bit about like how you think about the choices you make in building that deck. Like you talk about putting 4 visions of the future and Tipo, versus one jump ahead. What are you thinking about? What would you say to folks out there that are thinking about playing this deck? What they should think about when putting this deck together?
So whenever you're building Ruby Sapphire, there's obviously cards that are instant 4-ofs in the deck. In my opinion, that's obviously cards like Popsicle, Hiram, also Grandma Tala. I'd argue Maui is a 4-of, although you can remove it, but I like the versatility that it provides for the more like non-Ruby Sapphire matchups. It's a very good card against Steel Song. Very good into crashing into locations or getting rid of anything that can be troublesome. It also single clears a Clarabelle, which can actually be really important. But yeah, so I think there was something like 43, 44 cards that were just like instant includes in my deck. And then after that, among the last 17, 18 cards, it was just like, okay, so I want these in my deck. Let's adjust these ratios, see what works. But when it came to the specific tech cards I wanted for the event, I didn't want the Sisu Daring Visitor in my deck. I thought that the card for being uninkable wasn't powerful enough outside of the mirror match, so that was an instant cut. I valued Brawl higher, not only because it can hit more with Ice Block, but also because it's inkable. I think my Vegas deck only had 17 uninkables in it, if I remember correctly, with 4 of those being what I label as pseudo ink, which is an uninkable that turns into ink. So the 1 jumps and how far it goes. And then I also wanted the Ruby Chromacon as like a 1-of. It just allows your Maui to single clear a castle whenever you have it. You can also pump up a Tipo to trade into a Bonsai in the green-purple matchup, which is actually like pretty important because Bonsai being a 3/2 means it can be pretty difficult to get rid of. And if you let it get 4-6 lore, it can actually be like very crucial. And then also being able to have Tala pump up to 4 strength in order to kill or in order to banish a Daisy is actually very good. I didn't get a chance to do that. The one Daisy I played against was a Steel Song deck. I won game 1, then game 2, he was on the play and he just aggroed me out and then went Pete, so I just couldn't clear the board. I was like, okay, so you just had like the God Curve into Ruby Sapphire. And that was the match that made me have my 4th draw. So I was 104 at that point, and I was kind of like dooming in my head, but at the same time I was like posting Ted Lasso believe gifs in every chat. So and then I rallied out the 4 wins, so that was nice. The Ruby Chromacon, I actually played 2 green purple the following 2 rounds, and the Ruby Chromacon actually came up in both those matchups, not only to get rid of Bonsai but also to allow my Tipo to clear the 1-drop Clarabelle so that they could get off the shift line. So a lot of people don't really acknowledge Ruby Chromacon. So when it comes down on anything other than turn 1, they get a little surprised. They're just like, oh, I probably shouldn't have quested here. But then obviously I wanted another card for Ruby Sapphire in my deck. you could make an argument that you could put Be Prepared in there, but that's just an answer, and I wasn't really looking for answers. I was looking for cards that replace themselves in the mirror, gave me like more card advantage. So the King Candy fit that bill. King Candy was actually Dewey's idea. Came to me, sent me a message in Discord one night. He was like, now hear me out, and then sent me a deck list. And anytime you see anybody say "hear me out" or hear him say "hear me out," you just know it's a
Immediately
bad
sus.
idea.
Yeah.
You're just like I really don't want to hear you. But he sent me a list that had 4 1-drop King Candy and 4 of the Shift King Candy, and he had I think 4 of the Friend Like Me and 4 How Far I'll Go. So I'm like, I think you overcooked this, dude. So, but like the King Candy was really nice as a one of. It's just like another Hiram almost, and then it's pretty much a 5th Grand Matala, just not inkable. So being able to filter more cards through the deck was pretty nice.
Yeah, I've seen red blue probably also very cooked lists. They use the red 2-drop uninkable 2/3 rush. Is it
Turbo?
it's taffeta or something? It's one of the racers that can beat King Candy as shift.
Yeah, it's Turbo.
Turbo.
Yep,
Yep, Turbo.
okay.
Yeah, it's a 2/3. I think that's just coping really hard. If you're that worried about aggro, then you should just be doing the Sisu Daring Visitor into Shift Sisu line, just because it's more consistent and it's actually good into the red blue mirror.
Right.
So
they were cooking Basil 1-drop with the support and giving the support to the turbo to take it out.
Yeah.
It seemed like it's a cool concept, but it seemed like a little too much just to do with aggro.
I kind of floated that idea early on in the format when aggro was everywhere, but I wasn't doing turbo. I did Queen just because Queen is inkable. So you give up the 1 extra willpower for the inkability, which is in a deck like red blue. It's very, very important to have not an astronomical amount of uninkables in the deck, unless they're like the pseudo ink cards like 1 jump and How Far I'll Go. Also, another thing with my deck too is I wanted to have enough answers to items as well as locations, and there were a lot of people that were playing just 2 Cusco and nothing else. Personally, I think Cusco is worse than Hideaway, mainly because if you're tapping out 6 ink to play Cusco to get rid of a location or an item, that's all you're doing in the turn, and you just leave behind a 3/5 body that quests for 2, which is fine. It's respectable. But Hideaway allows you to tuck away the location or item, but then also play a Tala or a Hiram and keep your engines going. The fact that Hideaway is inkable and also acted as a pseudo 1 jump ahead pretty much made me have 4 1 jumps in my deck. So I had like 8 ramp spells for turn 2. Which there were a couple times where I Hideaway and tucked away one of my items so I could ramp on turn, or just so I could play a 4-drop on turn 3.
I told them about that last week when we were doing a little practice match at game night, where I was like, I saw Justin do something I never like imagined, but in the scenario it made a lot of sense, where you had your 2-drop Hideaway and you're playing in the Steel Song, so you're like, I can just ramp with my popsicle. I don't need to do anything right now.
So whenever you specifically tuck away a popsicle, it's pretty much a 1 jump. It's like a controlled 1 jump because you know what you put into your inkwell. But obviously you get rid of your items or your items, so you can't Hiram on the following turn. But there are sometimes there are a lot of times against Steel Song where you don't even want to Hiram on turn 4 because especially whenever, or not turn 4 but turn 3 when you have 4 ink, because especially whenever you're on the draw, because they have aerial and you're like, well, I don't want to draw these 2 cards and then wheel it away anyway.
Yep.
There's also a lot of times against Steel Song where I'll just put a Hiram on board and just not use its ETB trigger to draw 2 cards against Steel Song, just because I know that they had wheel in hand already. So it's like, I'm just going to make you wheel me and then I'll draw 2 cards the next turn and still have an item. It's very difficult for Steel Song to answer Hiram unless they have a multiple combination of spells in their hand. So something like Long Came Zeus plus Let the Storm Rage On or Strength, which isn't a lot because when Hiram hits the board, they usually don't have enough ink as well as singers in play in order to immediately answer it. So the moment that Hiram draws you 4 cards, that's just insane value.
Sure. Definitely.
So Brad has the fun questions we like to ask folks here
Okay.
for all of our podcasts. So you want to go ahead and Brad?
Which one?
The favorite card?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I forgot we changed that to me. Yeah, what is your favorite card in the game, Justin?
Favorite card in the game?
Yeah.
Isn't it obvious? Hiram Flaversham.
Hiram?
Yeah, I mean I mean I love drawing cards. So in every game I've played, I've always been attracted to the more control-y-esque decks. So like in Yu-Gi-Oh, I played a bunch of like runic combo variants, which those are spells that you give up your battle phase, but they have added benefits of either summoning a monster or being some form of removal spell. So they were like dual purpose, which I really liked. And then they also had another spell that said you could shuffle 3 of them back to draw 3 whenever you activated one. So it was pretty fun to do that. Probably why I'm very attracted to Ruby Sapphire is because of playing those kind of decks for like the past year before Lorcana. When Rise of the Floodborn came out and Hiram was out, I was like, oh, this card's sweet. And Popsicle is just a cantrip, so like with the Nick Wild, so that one Popsicle that drew you a card earlier on in the game, then you go Hiram to draw you 2 cards, and then Nick Wild gets you that Popsicle back on turn 5, and you play it, and then draw another card, and then quest with Hiram, that one Popsicle turned into like 5 cards. So yeah. It was pretty good. Obviously that deck really wasn't that format, unfortunately. Mainly because it just once people figured out how to play red purple correctly, it just had no play into that deck. I mean, Goat, Spellbook were just killer for the deck, and you were inherently slow, and they just had answers. So I shelved that deck, and then Lucky Dime and Medusa came out in Inklands. So I was like, okay, now I'm gonna pick this deck back up. Then I shelved it for set champs to play green purple, because everyone was playing red blue, and I was like,
yeah.
Right.
I well remember that.
People were playing red blue and red purple, so I was like, hey, this deck plays pretty well into them. But then I
was this close to getting the mat, Justin. I was this close.
Sorry.
It's all good.
Sorry, if it makes you feel better, I technically won 4 of them. So yeah, so and then like once set 4 came out, I got back onto it. I was leading up to Chicago, the few weeks leading up into it was kind of like in an odd headspace of what do I want to play. I was playtesting Green Steel a lot, didn't like it. Then my friend John helped convince me that red blue was just the way to go. Even if Green Steel was attacking your hand, Hiram completely offset that. So Hiram is just my favorite card, at least right now. I hope when that error happened in the app, I kind of lost my mind.
Yeah,
I was like, there's no way that they're doing this again after they said that they weren't going to do it, and they're doing it to my boy Hiram. So
that happened right before we recorded one night, and we were like, what is going on?
I was stressing out that whole night, and I'm pretty sure someone called the social media manager or something at Ravensburger, and they're like, hey, you need to get up and tweet something about this being an error. So
yeah,
like
I believe it.
Let's hope that Hiram never gets banned for my sake.
Yeah, and I don't think he would. We've talked about it before, where they've provided so many answers for Hiram now with ways with characters and abilities that a target strength. With his 1 strength, he's an easy target for a lot of people who know that they're going to be running into that. And literally every blue deck is running Hiram.
Yeah,
right? So,
there's a hot take I have that if you really want to hit the Hiram engine, you just ban Popsicle. So.
I would do it.
It's a hot take, but regardless, red blue best deck. I honestly think it's probably, even though Greed Steel had a great showing this weekend. When I was watching through top 64, at least until the end of top 32, I saw a lot of the red blue were in the Elsa bracket, the ones that were in top 32 or top 32 at least. So there was a lot of like friendly fire going on, which is why that you didn't see as much red blue advance further into the tournament. I mean, I know I played a mirror in top 16, and I think there was at least one other mirror, one or two more mirrors before that. So, but yeah.
Yeah,
Favorite
and that
cards,
was with Jonathan Williams, right? That was the top 16
Yeah.
match.
I chatted with him a bit. I think every challenge he's been to, he's made top 64, but lost in it.
Yeah, when
Yeah,
I saw you were
know.
paired up against him, I think that I recalled him he was #1 in Swiss in Atlanta, that first event that we went to.
Yes,
After
surprisingly,
9
with green purple.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. He
Well,
lost
I mean,
first round though.
Yeah,
his
he
next
did.
round after you was with Zan. So
I feel like I said, he to be honest, if I'm being honest, when Zan made top 32, I didn't even know what side of the bracket I was on. I was just like, I'm just gonna roll with it, whatever. They didn't really have the bracket out on display in the day 2 room. So I didn't know if I was in Zan's side of the bracket, but whenever he got to top 32, I was like, okay, I mean, he's probably gonna end up winning this.
Yeah.
And then when he was in top 16, I was like, okay, yeah, he probably is gonna win this. But I would have matched into him in top 8. I'd beaten all the Greed Steel I've played all weekend. So I mean, I'm very confident in that matchup, especially after playing it so much with Red Blue last format. So I also had 3 Sisu in my deck, which can help mitigate like the Prince John stuff, Diablo stuff, and everything. And I knew he was, yeah. So I didn't watch any of his feature matches past like top 32, but I heard he was doing some kind of like bag manipulation with muses and stuff.
Yeah.
So like whenever someone skilled knows how to utilize the trigger effects to their fullest potential, then they know how to manipulate the game state in a way that is advantageous to them. So there are a lot of times where uh like there are some things that he can think of that other people don't. So it's just like, oh, okay, well that's a learning experience.
yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. So Andy, Brad, do you have any other questions?
No.
No.
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah,
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Incredible
Yeah.
having you. Incredible
Um,
performance, and looking forward to seeing what you do in Seattle.
Yeah, we do.
Hopefully I'll get a third top. Going 3 for 4 before continentals would sound pretty nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Lorcana resume.
Yeah, right. Maybe
get
I'll
more of
become a
those-
pro.
Get more of those let it goes. And was it a Cinderella? Is that what's the order of the prizes?
So-
Let it go. Yeah, go ahead.
So for a 2,000 player event, top 128 gets Let It Go. Top 64, you got the Cinderella Stout Hearted. Top 32, you got Rapunzel Gifted with Healing, and then top 16 got the Invite in the Mat, and then top 8 is the Mickey, and then whatever additional pricing is after that. I think it's
Yeah,
just
you're like,
4
whatever.
and 2.
Yeah.
4 and 2 are
Yeah.
silly. They had to like when they expanded it to 2048, they had to shoe in like 2 more prizes in there because they moved the Mickey and the Invite.
Yeah.
And so you get your Mickey at top 8, and then you
Mhm.
win that match, and they give you
2 boxes.
2 booster boxes, not even cases, like 2 booster boxes, $200 worth of product, and 100 prize wall
Don't
tickets.
forget. Yeah, I mean the prize wall tickets get you like what's that, Matt? Like $400 or $500 or something.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's not nothing, but like you just
Yeah.
went from your like $20,000 Mickey card to the, just a
Yeah.
couple booster boxes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But-
and surprisingly on Saturday, Melee was saying that top 32 got invites, and I was like, "Well, that's a shocker."
Yeah.
I will take that. All I gotta do is win one match.
Yep.
And when I was matched into that green, I think it's Traverse Tavern. I think is
Yep.
what his
Yeah.
name was. I looked at his deck list, and it was just strictly green steel mid range, like barely any discard package. He only had one We Don't Talk About Bruno, so it meant that he also had a 1 or 2 Anna in his deck. So it meant that if a Tamatoa landed on the board, the only way he could out it was with the 1 of Bruno or the 1 of Anna if he was able to get a damage put onto it. So I knew that if I could get to a point where I could establish my late game cards, that it would be very difficult for him to come back and win, which has ended up what happening. especially in game 2. Like he had no shot in game 2. But yeah, so I felt really confident about that one. And then my top 32 was against Amber Emerald. That was simple. So, and then lost to Red Blue Mirror. So surprisingly, I only played 2 Steel Song and 2 Red Blue all weekend.
Wow.
Which is
Crazy.
wild with how many
Yeah,
there were there.
I was in the gauntlet of green decks, so I was kind of losing my mind.
But you're well prepared for it sounds like.
Yeah, there were some decisions I had made in order to be well prepared for it. Also, when I played those 2 green purples, I knew how to manage my hand in order to not allow them to get value off of Clarabelle. I think between the 2 matches, Clarabelle only drew 1 card, and it hit the board like 3 different times. So
Well done.
it was, yeah,
Yeah.
it takes a lot of like foresight and knowledge of certain matchups and cards in order to navigate your way through a game, especially some that are deemed unfavorable, like what they say is against Ruby Amethyst as well as green purple. So
Yeah.
Awesome.
Like I said, thank you so much for joining us, and congrats again on
Thank you.
your achievement. Do you have any shout outs you want to give to any family, friends, or stores you play at? And where can folks find you on social media?
So I would like to give a shout out to I'm technically on Team Mystic TCG, which is a local store here. I was on the team for Yu-Gi-Oh, and I think I'm one of 2 or maybe 3 people that play Lorcana, but I'm the only one that's been grinding the challenges because no one else has been able to get tickets, which I've been lucky for. So but yeah, shout out Mystic TCG, obviously collector store where I play at the most. The local Lorcana community here in St. Louis. I know that a lot of you were rooting for me whenever you found out that I had made day 2. So, and when I got the top 16, I almost actually cried for it because it was the one goal I had all weekend. So, and then obviously shout out to my friend Dewey from Chicago. And John and Elizabeth, they did a lot for me, so really appreciate it.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Justin. We appreciate you joining us, and hopefully we'll have you back on in the future when you knock it out of the park at Continentals in Disneyland.
Oh, I'm hoping to. I mean, it's my birthday weekend, right? So I gotta have the luck.
Do
Yeah,
it.
that's right.
Yeah.
We'll be rooting for you.
Yeah, but thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
You bet, man.
Thanks.
Anytime.
All right. What a great interview we had with Justin Ward. Thank you so much again for joining us on our podcast. Hopefully, we wish him the best of luck as he moves on to DLC Seattle and to the Continentals in Disneyland. But we're going to jump into our main segment where we dig into the meta a little bit that we came out with from DLC Vegas and DLC Birmingham. You know, and I will say, I think what stands up to me, which really isn't, I think, a huge surprise to any of us, but is, you know, we had basically 4,000 players between the 2 tournaments, and the top 4 decks for both of them were basically identical, right? And in the entering it, we had the top deck being Ruby Sapphire, the top deck, and then second was Amber Steel, third was Ruby Amethyst, and then fourth was the Emerald Amethyst deck. Just kind of a wild, thing. Are either of you really surprised that Ruby Sapphire ended up being the top deck in both of these and not, say, like Ruby Amethyst?
No, I think so. I think if you just sort of map it out here, we saw DeCandio win and then get second in those big events, and we saw Steel Song have this big push in the meta. If you went to Inkdex, the week before DLC Vegas, you'd see, we said it on the podcast, Steel Song was far and above, like 10-15% ahead of the next deck in meta share. And so what's the best list against, Steel Song? Ruby Sapphire. So
yep.
I think a lot of people like Ruby Sapphire. Like we heard from Justin, he loves the deck. Vince is trying to love it. I love and hate it, depending on what cards they give me after my altar. But I think it just was an opportunity for people to jump on red blue. A lot of people say that is the best deck. They've said it's the best ink combination for a while. So it isn't a hard sell to people. You know, hey, look, lots of Steel Song. Red blue, good against Steel Song. Awesome, I'll take it. I think if we had seen a larger share of like red blue before this, we would see Ruby Amethyst. I do think in Seattle, I'm predicting that we're going to see it just sort of tick one more notch to the whatever left or right. In that red blue was the most popular before, especially if we see it in a lot of set champions and things like that. We're now going to see Ruby Amethyst come out in droves to help fight off the red blue, and we'll see slightly less of red blue. I think Vince said it before. I do kind of agree that Steel Song might be a little cooked in the current meta, but a couple grab your swords could maybe fix it. We'll have to see.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think, Brad? Are you surprised by this?
No, I expected Ruby Sapphire to be up there. We've known since set 3 that the Ruby Sapphire deck, the way that it works, you know, that Steel Song just dies to it. There are ways to draw correctly and get through it, you know, assuming that they draw poorly. I've been on the winning side of that matchup before with my Steel Song, but yeah, like Andy said, you know, DeCandio really set the line with the Steel Songs, and then I think it was just. It wouldn't have been a deck that I'd take to Vegas, knowing that red blue was just so prominent. As Justin said, like his entire bracket was basically red blue, and that's why we didn't probably see more of them in the top, you know, the top tables, because they just had to mirror match each other, which is just not fun to me. You know, I play against red blue and a lot of the locals all the time. Set 3 red blue still beats me, you know, so it's like I had my time with it. I'm tempted to go back to it, but I'm not surprised that it's successful. I've seen its success. I've seen great players go far with it. We just talked to Justin, who just, you know, expertly did it, you know, in both Chicago and with the same deck, you know, different, you know, cards because there's a new set, but like red blue is clearly performing, and it's no surprise to me that it's up there and going to stay up there, in my opinion.
Yeah, but I think what's most interesting here is that in the top 32 in both of these, it did not have the best conversion rate going into top 32 of all the decks that were played. So when we look here at DLC Birmingham, you know, you had Amethyst Emerald, I think actually had the best conversion rate. Then DLC Vegas, I think probably Emerald Steel had the best conversion rate. You know, so just kind of wild matchup. Now, granted, this is going to top 32, not second day top cut. Reason for that is just easier to compare the two kind of apples to apples a little bit more. But you know, as Brad mentions, it's a little weird when you get into the bracket. You're now kind of put into these like the Elsa, you know, and you know, Cinderella bracket, so you can weird things can happen when it's a single elimination.
I wanted to ask Justin about that. I don't know if he actually knows, or if either of you guys know whether or not those are those brackets just predetermined based on your rank. They don't choose those brackets. I'm pretty sure that was it was March Madness style, right? Where
I would hope so.
First, 64th, and then the very top of the next bracket was second, 32nd. So that first and second couldn't ever see each other until the finals.
That's absolutely right. Yeah. Okay. Because I mean, we saw that
it was chance that a lot of this stuff kind of got grouped together, and
that's absolutely right. You know, I mean, you've got to take into consideration too, how about the ranks go when you've got folks are fighting for, you know, to get into 64, and then on the other side of the bracket, you've got folks that are IDing into you know, into day 2 because they did so well in their first few rounds. You know, I mean, I think we saw that that Zach Bivens, I think, lost out in top 64, was first seed to the 64th player. So it just goes to demonstrate how, there is variability there, and also, your kind of March Madness style bracketing.
We had a I don't think these percentages we have on our sheet here are the conversion rates. It's like the total number, right?
No,
but
right. That's right.
I know the Amber Amethyst Hyper Aggro had something like 30 players on it or something in the main event, so it had like less than 5%, but it had like 6 people make top 64, so it like doubled its conversion its percentage. So I wanted to say that had the highest conversion rate, but if it did, it's like a technicality. Hyper Aggro, Amber Amethyst. It had an insane conversion rate, but it was like 30 people to like 5 people.
So I'm looking at the meta for the whole thing, and so there were 94 players that had it. So it represented 5% of the overall meta game on day one.
Top 64, it was like what, 7% or something like that, or 8%.
Yeah, I don't think I have the top 64.
I remember seeing it when it was live, and I was just like, "Oh man, look, Hyper Aggro."
Oh no, I do have it. I do have it. So there were four of the four players made it to top 64 playing Amber Amethyst.
Okay.
And we give so much trouble to Brad. Blurple made an appearance, top 64.
Yeah, I did.
One.
And if only he was the only Blurple player, could have 100% conversion rate.
Yeah. We'll see about Seattle. I got some work to
do. It may have been one, because it's grouped into others on the day one meta game. It's in the 184 decks of like 10% of other that we're playing.
Okay, if there's a deck you shouldn't bring to set champions, it's other. Okay, if your deck is getting classified as other, I've seen lists that list mono green. I've seen a mono green get its own slice of the pie. All right, if you're being thrown in with other.
I wanted to talk about one of those decks in other that was somebody actually had some success with Ruby Steel, which is something I played around with in Inklands just to do some like lore siphoning and stuff with the Floodborns and Honest John. But he was the most expensive card in the deck was a 4 of the champion Robin Hood, but everything else was almost pennies. And it looked like he was utilizing the Jim Hawkins to bring out the RLS Legacy, the 7 Dwarves Mine, had some knights in his deck to do some damage by moving people there. Like, great. This guy named Philip Quiet was his name, and made top 64 with this deck, and it was pretty impressive for a combo that you never see. And
so we saw a feature match of that, right? I'm pretty sure the commentator I'm pretty sure there's a feature match of that deck, because the commentators are like, what the heck is this card, mate? Like, what do these do? And they kept forgetting what different cards do, and they would have to like remind each other, and it was interesting. You don't see
it's really things. Because he's running the Tiana, which is a great card that just doesn't see a lot of play. But he gets his hand down to nothing, plays that Tiana, so no actions can be played. It's just it's an always Pete basically, and which he also has 4 of Pete's in there. And then when he needs cards, he has his dock to discard your whole hand and draw 2 cards. So it's like you can see how the deck works, and it's just fascinating to me when something like this sneaks in there. And because sitting across from that, you'd be like, what do I do about that? Or like, I've never seen this. How do I prepare my altering and everything to go into it in the second game? Like,
so in my opinion, that last part is one of the reasons why sometimes decks like this do well, is people don't know how to play with them. Yeah. And so as a result, they, misplay. They're like, I wasn't expecting that. There's these off meta decks that can throw people for a surprise, and that doesn't necessarily make it a good deck. What I will say is that I think, that's an interesting play line for Ruby Steel. I certainly think there is a deck there to be made. I just don't think it's there yet. Like, I wouldn't recommend anybody look at this deck. And, like, if you want to have fun with it and play with it at, for a social event or whatever, play amongst your friends, go for it.
When-
As far as a deck to bring to set championships, I'd steer away from that recommendation.
Before we get away from it, most important card in that deck, Super Pippo.
Super Peepo, let's
Super
go.
Pippo.
That was my favorite moment of the Birmingham one, was when the Italian player was doing the interview and he said Super Peepo. And then he corrected himself to say Goofy, and I was like, "No,
It's Super Pippo.
Super
But-
Peepo.
Yeah, I will say, one, you don't have to listen to Vince. You can play any deck that you want in the set champions, and it's perfectly fine. You might scrub out like Brad, but you'll have fun doing it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all that matters. I will say though, while I think these sort of one-off decks, like Vince said, catch people by surprise and stuff, I think one thing you might not realize, these players, I guarantee you, practice so much more than the average red, blue, ruby amethyst player, because you need to know your deck against all of the matchups you're playing, because if you're going to catch your opponent off guard, you have to know what you're doing, right? Otherwise you're catching yourself off guard, right? That I've fallen pitfall to that before, where I see one of these decks, Spessy does it to the best of us, where we look at a deck, red green, Spessy says it's the best deck in the meta. I can do this. I've got those cards, and we throw them all together, and you start playing with it, and you're like, what is this jank pile of cardboard that I've put together? And then you're like watching the video as you're losing a match of Lorcana, and you're like, this deck, what am I doing wrong here? I think when you play this sort of, kind of sly, sneaky, like meta breaker kind of deck, this unique deck that's going to catch people off guard, you need to be very, very skilled and honed in with what your game plan is going to be. So get started now. Hurry. There's only 2 weeks left. October 6th, Grapes games.
Just don't listen to Andy. What you're playing isn't jank. It's fine. It's a good deck. Blurple makes your heart happy. Play it.
It's bad, but it can make you happy.
It's not bad. It just
Vince is bad, and he makes me happy.
Yeah. So is there anything else that kind of stands out? One thing I'll say is these top 232s in both these events. In Vegas, there's a lot more diverse in deck selection that came out versus what happened in Birmingham. And like, again, some of this happens because of just the randomization that happens as a result of the bracket. But does there anything like really stand out to you? Have any of these decks that made top 32?
I think us Americans are slightly more unhinged. We're more willing to run the jank decks, if you will. This is America. They're much more sensible, perhaps in Europe, you could call it.
Much more orderly, if you will.
I do want to say, I do want to give our regular public service announcement. The number of decks at both of these DLCs in the top 64 that were not running 60 cards, that were running more than 60 cards, was too darn high. Just too many of them. Just too many of them. If I had known Justin was running 61 cards, I wouldn't have brought him on the podcast. I'd strictly 60. No. I am jesting. But someone told me there was a 72 card list in like the top 4 on one of these events. I was
72 cards. That's too much.
Yes.
We had a guy, Bradley, in our Stitch set championship at game night was running 70 something cards and got top 4 with it. It was a purple steel, I think. It was definitely steel. I don't remember, but like that's way too many. Like I'll forgive a couple extra, for those slots. I know Andy won't, but
I won't. Yeah, here it is.
But
just second place going into top cut. Hamza Khan has a 72 card red blue deck with 26 uninkables, and like just think of every red blue card that's ever been in any red blue list. Just 2 of them. There's at least 2 of them in this list.
Yeah. That's at that just point. Like, you know what? This card's good. I'm just gonna put it in there. And like,
It's
I
also
will-
one of those things too where you can justify it because I'm sure he's got everything in that deck to siphon through his entire deck, so he can find exactly what he's looking for. He has
There's
more
no
cards to go through, but what's that?
No justification, Brad. There is no
But still,
justification.
in that
All right.
situation, though, I feel like it's more justified than it would be in a Steel Song or something.
Let's see where this guy
like,
lost. He probably lost
Listen.
his top 64. First round, out instantly. Got milled. He probably got
I-
milled.
get milled when he's got.
60
I don't
cards.
know.
Look,
I would never do
61,
it, but
I think Justin said he was running 61, 62. Those are forgivable, right? I think, it's a percentage point where 72 cards. That's 12 additional cards. How do you get second in a top cut when you couldn't decide which 12 cards to remove from your deck?
Yeah, definitely would recommend it. I mean, part of building a deck is understanding like what I gotta cut, and that just really comes, I think, with play testing and being creative and thinking about how much of these are. I mean, we heard from Justin, and I agree. I think this is core to any deck. There are gonna be cards where they're core cards to your deck, and you're gonna have 4 ofs no matter what, and then you've got to make determinations on what those are. I don't think having 61 cards makes your deck necessarily a percentage. It's like a fraction of percent
Right.
each card that you add, right?
Yeah.
So I get what you're saying though, Andy. I'm being a little pedantic here, but is that like, I think, I think Justin actually gave a good justification for this. Is that Lorcana has a pretty strong alter sys mechanic that allows you to, basically filter to 14 cards before you even put one card on the table. And that's, pretty darn good. I almost had you came this close to almost having another little Mickey.
I got good feedback on that.
I subscribe to the Frank Karsten model that the only viable reason for having more than 60 cards in your deck is because you as a player and a deck builder are not good enough to determine which is the better card to keep and which is the worst card to remove. Which it isn't to say like you guys suck if you're running 61 cards. It's to say that like it's okay for that scenario, right? If you have I start with decks that have 65, 67 cards, and you narrow it down and you play test and you find which cards work and which ones don't. And ultimately there does come a point where you have 61 cards and you're just like, look, I'm worried that I might remove a card that I actually need rather than the 61st card, which is supposed to be the worst, the one I should be not having in this deck. And by practice, hard work, dedication, you can become a better player and you can overcome those fractions of a percentage point that additional card lowers your deck's win rate.
Yeah. Sounds good to me. Well, let's move on to Villain of the Week. So, Mr. Mayor, you want to tell us who the villain is this week?
We're letting
Get
Brad
the
do
honor
it again.
Let's do
I
it.
I mean, my understanding is it's Pete. I don't know what's
Pastry chef.
pastry chef or pastry chomper. Pastry
Pastry
chomper,
chopper.
right?
I'm
Yeah.
taking that title back. I love my pastries.
Letting Brad read the card. That's a bold move, Cotton. Let's see if it pays
It
off.
is. We'll see if I can do it. It's been a long night already. Apologies to Gantu because it is Pete this week, games referee from Set 5 Shimmering Skies. He is Dreamborn and a villain from the color Steel. He's an uncommon 3-cost inkable, 3 strength, 3 willpower, quest for 1 lore. His ability is Blow the Whistle. When you play this character, opponents can't play actions until the start of your next turn. Art by Luis Huerta. I might have
Huerta?
mispronounced it.
Huerta.
Huerta. Yep. So what do you guys
You're
think?
not going to read the flavor text?
You didn't put it in the box, Vince. The flavor
card's
text
right there, buddy. The card's right there.
If it ain't cheating, I dang it. See, you made me screw it up. It ain't cheating if you're the one making the rules.
How topical. Anyway,
There we go.
have we had
Oh.
art from Louise Huerta before?
Yeah.
That name sounded really familiar.
We've had quite a bit of art. And while I'm looking it up, you tell why is this our villain this week, Andy? This is kind of your push.
Well, I'm pretty sure we could make a like master cut of the DLC events where it's just like the casters going Pete, 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 Pete. And then they were even doing the pose. They were doing the like pose that they constantly kept saying they should have brought a whistle. And then the production team was like, no, please don't whistle in the microphone. And it just, this card was everywhere. If you guys are avid listeners of the podcast, or if you hear me ramble my deranged thoughts at a local game store, you will probably have heard me say that I am not sold on Pete. I one turn blocking actions to me feels like bouncing, right? It feels like that closer of Genie that was in the old school, like the Artifacts, Tempo, Amethyst, Emerald. It just buys you one turn. That's it. It's like you need to be able to capitalize on that one turn to win, or else this card's really not that great. However, if you watched any games from any of these DLCs, I'm wrong. The card can be used, reused in Amethyst Emerald, and just the amount of times where a Pete came down in such a clutch moment.
It's not in that deck.
Well, not
Emerald Steel.
Oh, you're right. Oh, Emerald Steel. Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Sorry. I said the wrong thing. I'm like, wait, why is that card not in that deck? Of course it's in that deck. I've seen it happen. So yeah, but playing a Pete at the right moment is just so clutch, especially for a deck that with either Amethyst or Emerald is generally trying to build a wide board and close out the game with questing.
Yeah. I alluded to it earlier when I was talking about Steel Song into Red Blue. This card, the game meant nothing. It was just practice for Vegas. This card is what won me around with Justin at game night. I was up pretty significantly on Steel Song. He just wasn't drawing well. I know what that deck can do, and I was just taking advantage of everything I could. At the most opportune time, when I was at 19 lore, I played Rapunzel and I played Pete. I played Pete first, and then I played Rapunzel for insurance in case he could do some kind of weird removal or whatever. But because he could not play his Be Prepared or whatever he had in hand to remove those characters, that won me the game. And he's such a strong card. You alluded to it in Emerald, where you could have your Mother Knows Best, and all these cards are just, you can bounce your own card with Muses or what. I think Muses is 2 strength, right? But there's so many bounce mechanics with Emerald already, and then we have Jesus, our team member Jesus, who's running his purple steel right now with the
actual bounce package.
Yeah, with the actual bounce package for the probably not the sole reason, but one of the big reasons is to take that Pete, block your actions, bounce him next turn, and block him again as many times as he can to protect his board, and it's become just an MVP in the meta right now.
Yeah, I'll say though, on a lot of respects too, especially if you're playing more of a tempo deck, it's honestly one of those cards that, you can bounce to get more utility out of them. But a lot of times, especially when you're playing like slower decks that take time to ramp, if you play Pete at the right opportune time, all you really do need to do is buy yourself one turn. There's not necessarily a need to bounce and play him again to give your opponent, another opportunity to play actions or something, because there's a lot of utility, I think, that goes into stopping, when you're like, okay, I'm playing against a Ruby player, they're at 6 ink, normally you'd say, I'm not going to go wide because I know they're going to be prepared, but now I can go wide. And I could play Pete, and like just leverage the ability to, get more value on my next turn. And if you can, quest and then do bounce shenanigans, great. You can get more value out of Pete. But it's a card, we say this a lot. There are cards that are lower costs that you do not want to play on curve, right? So Pete is a great example of this. There is very few scenarios where I think you would want to play Pete on 3. Maybe in like a Steel Song if you're worried about, say, a Whole New World. Like that might be the one kind of, you know,
Yeah. That's the problem with
avenue.
Pete, though, right? Like you said, if you're worried about Whole New World, you play that Pete, but then they just Whole New World your next turn, right? You're not close enough to winning. Buying you that one turn there doesn't help you at all.
Yeah, well, I think at that point, what you're hoping to do if you play Pete,
Empty
I
out
mean,
your
we
hand
talked
a
a little
little
bit
bit more.
about this. What's that?
So
Did you wanna
maybe empty out.
Yeah,
Yeah, empty your
Yeah,
hand
you're
a
just
little
trying
bit
to
more.
commit
You
his
wanna-
one
yeah,
board. Right.
you want to empty you want to give yourself more time to empty your hand. But I think we talked a little bit about this. This is probably why I think Steel Amber is gonna fall a little bit after the results of this weekend. A little bit is just because I think it probably didn't see a lot. It clearly didn't see the success I think Amber Steel players were hoping it would see. And I'm not sure that this card adds any value into that particular play deck, to be honest with you. I think you really want to play this in decks like the Emerald Steel, the Amethyst Steel decks that like Jesus is playing. I mean, case in point, Jesus tonight saw that I was, at 6 inning, played Pete, and really the answer I needed to have my next turn was be prepared, and I couldn't play it. And
When you bring
you
up big
deck
20,
value,
He has to
what?
get to 20 the next turn, though, or else you just B prep anyway, right?
Yes, but the problem is like, and I think this is a little bit of pilot error on my own part, but also just kind of bad hand. It's like in my hand at that exact time, I had 7 ink, I had a be prepared, I had 3 8-drop Sisus,
Jesus.
and I drew, no joke, my 4th 8-drop Sisu.
Oh, you're running 4.
There's your problem.
Yeah.
There's your problem.
Yeah,
You only need 3 of those bad boys.
So I had nothing that I could do. So I couldn't, because Pete was on board, so yeah, like obviously not ideal hand to have, like suboptimal
Even
hand
ink.
to have.
Oof.
Yeah.
And so can't ink, can't play. So the only thing I could have played without Pete on board was the Be Prepared, and it's really a card that I needed to play given the board presence that Jesus had at the time.
But there was a couple times in some of those feature matches that we saw where like 2 Petes were needed, right? I think Pete is essentially used as a Bare Necessities or an Ursula. It's another another option for that. It does the same thing. It stops them from being able to play a very wide range of tools that would stop you from winning the game. Pete, Bare Necessities, and Ursula do nothing for you if you're not able to capitalize off of them. You play the Pete to stop the Be Prepared, but if that buys you 1 extra turn and you're at like 5 lore and you just get like 3 more lore because you bought that extra turn, like what did that do for you, right? Like you just get Be Prepped the next turn. So it's a nice card, but I do think it requires that skill from the pilot. You have to choose the right time. You have to know when to use it, right? Know when to hold them and when to fold them.
I think being paired with Emerald as well, and you're already touching on Bare Necessities, Ursula. Bare Necessities is Amber, but Ursula especially, I'm going to focus on Emerald. Ursula lets you see their hand, discard a song, then you can see what songs are coming up and prepare for when you want to play that Pete. And then Pete himself, in an Emerald Seal deck, can just sing Mother Knows Best on himself and then reissue that. If there's multiple threats in there, like the advantage of just being able to bring him back and play him again to essentially stop them. And this is a niche situation where you're blocking multiple songs and everything, but the knowledge, as we always say on here and it's everywhere, that knowledge is king in the game. If you know what they have, you can plan out your next several turns. And if you have a bounce package with Pete, you're stopping them from doing any kind of actions that are going to benefit them and lower your win condition, right? So
Are you
I've
saying
had a
that
lot of-
knowledge and wisdom is a good card? Is that what you're saying there?
Yes, I am saying that. But I've had success.
I mean,
with
I
them
think
in-
knowledge and wisdom is a good card.
You're not going to bait us into that conversation, Vince. I was making a joke because you said knowledge. All right.
No, I'm just saying. I think it's a good card. I want it on the record. I think it's a good
All right.
card.
All right, everyone, make
Sneaky
sure you
two lore.
subscribe, like,
instant
ring the
lore is
bell. We're
good.
gonna have a special episode, debate edition. Vince versus Andy. Why knowledge and wisdom is not a good card.
Andy's just gonna sit here and go, Jake.
Jank, 100% certified jank.
I mean, I'm playing it in my hyper aggro deck, but you know,
Yeah.
it has a place in decks. But
I think instant lore is always good, but that's a whole other conversation. If you actually want to have that debate, that could be fun. But
Yeah. But I mean, I think we saw that this was a good card. But I do want to talk a little bit about Luis Huerta because we did say, this artist sounds familiar. So has drawn cards. It calls me Flotsam, Ursula Spy, Don Carnage.
yes,
What did you call me? Maleficent Monstrous Dragon.
oh,
That's
it should have
where we
been
heard it
enchanted.
that's it should have been enchanted. That's where we've heard it before. Okay.
Dragonfire.
Okay,
And also did the Dragonfire for the DLC.
What's his best card, Vince?
Lawrence. And by far the best card drawn has gone to the Galactic Federation captain.
yes.
So I guess there really isn't so much apologies needed to Gandu this week because he gets
Close. We're not quite there.
Amazing.
Does this mean Luis is your favorite Lorcana artist then by default, Vince?
maybe
might be.
It's
I'm
so
looking at
hard. So hard to pick a one singular artist for any of these and stuff. I'm a little jealous. I wish I'd gone to Las Vegas because I really wanted to get Julie Vu to sign my Sorcerer's Spellbook, and I forgot to give one to Ron before he left to get signed. But
you had to get a ticket for it though. It was tough to.
Oh, was it ticketed? I didn't.
It was free, but it was ticketed.
Interesting.
Same with the pack battles against Ryan Miller and Steve Warner. And
that tracks.
The other guy.
That tracks. Steve Miller follows us, by the way, which I think is.
Steve Warner follows us.
He just liked our tweet. I don't think.
He likes us. Oh, we're not.
We're not there yet.
Follow us, Steve. Trust me, it's worthwhile content.
Yeah.
You ever need help with card design? I know a guy.
I'm gonna link Luis Huerta's page on our description below because I'm looking at it right now and everything on here is amazing, absolutely amazing.
Yeah, we could honestly we could do an entire episode on just the art.
Maybe bonus content for the Patreon one day.
This is incredible. Anyway,
any last thoughts about Pete, the games referee?
I don't know. I might cosplay as Pete for Seattle. It's probably a pretty easy one to do. I've already got the belly for it, and you just throw on a referee shirt, grab yourself a whistle,
with a whistle,
maybe draw a couple extra cards. Start of my game, and
I'll have to find it.
But
I do have one last thing about Pete. I did see today somewhere on Twitter. There's this viral thing going around on the internet right now about this baby hippo over in I think Thailand. I forget its name. It's the cutest little thing. It's really aggressive and just playful and so fun. Somebody Photoshop Pete or Photoshop that hippo on Pete doing this, and it was hilarious. Yeah. We're gonna have to find that. Yeah.
I don't know if I'll have permission to use ad. Doesn't matter. We'll steal it. They stole it anyway. Great artist steal. We're gonna post that up on the screen for you. We'll make sure that's in there. That I saw that one too, Brad. That was adorable.
That's so great. Well, let us know your opinion of Pete's game referee in the comments below, and tell us who you think should be the next villain of the week. If you've enjoyed this episode, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. We're also on YouTube video, so please be sure to like and subscribe and hit that bell icon to be notified of our next episode. Until next week, Stay safe, fellow villains. Be wary of wannabe heroes who want to disrupt your villainous plans. And as always, remember the rules of villainy.